So the graveyard of empires. So that is a nickname given to the country Afghanistan, and the reason for that is very hard to throughout history. Many countries have tried to invade it and take control of it, but most of the time they've been defeated and they just went home empty-handed. Some notable examples of this is the Soviet occupation. They did try invading and have a communist takeover, but that ultimately failed. And now the most recent challenger to this nickname is the United States. So after the September 11th attacks, the United States decided to invade the country in the aims of taking down the Taliban government and also killing Osama bin Laden and taking down his Al Qaeda group who was responsible for the attacks. So for my speech, I'm going to be talking about how the war in Afghanistan is a failure and how it was a waste of money, how it wasted lives, and how it also destroyed the country. So for my first part, I'm going to talk about how the wasted money. So according to a New York Times article, the all in all, the total of the war so far has cost around $2 trillion. And with that 2 trillion, the U.S. has spent around 1.5 trillion of that. Or let me skip 1.5 trillion that of fighting the Taliban. And but the thing is though, the Taliban still controls 70% of the country even after all that money and fighting. Another thing that the U.S. Focuses on is counter-narcotic operations in the country. Um, Even though they do spend a lot of money on it, Afghanistan still produces 90% of the world's opium. So that's just some examples of how money has been wasting in this war for not really any benefit or gain. Another unfortunate cost of this war is the waste of lives. So in the Watson Brown University, they published some statistics. They claim that so far that the war has costed around 157,000 lives. Unfortunately, 48,000 of those were civilian. 2,300 U.S. soldier deaths, and then more than 20,000 injured soldiers. And then another BBC, they published an article claiming that there have been more civilian lives. Um, there have been more civilian lives or civilian deaths in the war than actual Taliban and rebel deaths. So the civilians make up the majority of the actually deaths from the war. And then on September 9th, 2019, Reuters published a story that after a long days of work, 30 Afghan farmers, after a long day of harvest, they were pine nut farmers, they got targeted and killed by a U.S. drone strike, which is a very unfortunate part of this war. So a thing about that is, other than it, obviously, innocent lives were taken away, the Taliban used this as effective propaganda as well to gain more recruits. So imagine if you're a young Afghan boy, you just lost your father or your brother. Sometimes it wouldn't be hard to believe that you would just join if somebody comes up to you and saying, "Hey, I can get revenge for the people who did this." So they do gain a lot of recruits that way from civilian collateral. And then incidents like this, unfortunately, are like everyday life for people in Afghanistan. So the third thing I want to talk about is how the war in Afghanistan has destroyed the country. So in an article by another article by the BBC, they claim that half of the country lives in poverty, and another article, and it's the second actually it's the second poorest country in the world. And then another article by another report by UNICEF came out saying that Afghanistan is the worst place to be born as a child, and the reasons for that is obviously the conflict and the fighting. Another reason for that is that since people are poor, children are expected to go work at a young age, and basically they can't go to school. They have to do basically adult tasks at a young age, and then and then. And then one more thing I wanted to talk about is some people claim that there are benefits to this war. In an article by Dissent magazine, they claim that the main benefits of this war were that they did establish democracy in Afghanistan. The U.S. did establish a government, however, Afghanistan is actually the government is actually one of the most corrupt governments in the world. Some funding that the U.S. has given the government has been siphoned away into the pockets of the politicians and not actually been used for proper good. And then it's not really even a democracy. There's a lot of rigged voting in the country, and also um, up until recently, Afghanistan has a problem where they somehow had two presidents, and those two presidents were fighting over who was the actual president. So it's not really democracy. It's actually, I mean, a failure of democracy. So the last thing I want to talk about is can we do to help? So obviously everybody watching this speech, we're all just regular people. We're not really politicians. We can't really do much to actually help. So the main thing that I found that we can probably do is just signing a petition. So this petition I linked is it's a it has so far 25,000 signatures, and if we do sign it, the creators of this petition do plan on sending it to Capitol Hill, to Donald Trump, and hopefully he can review it and make some changes. If I did a good enough job on this speech, I you can maybe donate. Donations work because a lot of people are hungry in the country as well, and that's it.